Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is episode 3 of our deep dive into all the nutrients that your aquarium needs in order to be healthy. And today we're going to be talking about nitrogen. And I think nitrogen is one of those nutrients that people are a little bit maybe like reluctant to dose, a little bit scared of. If you hear nitrogen, you usually think algae. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about why people chase having zero nitrates, like it's the holy grail of sort of like a planted tank, or why maybe other people, probably more like me, dump it into their tank like it's some sort of plant steroid. So we're going to try and get to the truth of the matter. We're going to look at breaking down what nitrogen actually is, how plants use it, where it comes from in your aquarium, and why zero nitrates isn't usually what you would want in a planted tank. So nitrogen is a macronutrient. It is part of your big 3, your NPK. And basically plants need a lot more of this. So more of it than like iron or trace elements. And it usually needs more of it than potassium or phosphate as well. And nitrogen is basically used to build proteins, enzymes, DNA, chlorophyll. It sort of really is the backbone of the plant. So if the other nutrients are sort of about colour, energy and structure, nitrogen is about mass, leaves, stems, growth rate, and these things all rely really heavily on nitrogen. So in your aquarium, nitrogen actually exists in 3 main forms. So you have ammonia and ammonium, which is NH3 or NH4+, nitrite, which is NO2, and nitrate, which is NO3. And fish produce ammonia from waste when they're pooping, and bacteria convert ammonia into nitrite into nitrate. And that right there is basically the nitrogen cycle. Now, plants can use ammonium directly and very efficiently, whereas nitrate is used a bit more slowly. But fish hate ammonia and plants love it, or at least in tiny amounts. So plants prefer ammonium because it takes less energy to use. It's not as hard for them to take up. But ammonium is extremely dangerous in aquariums. It's toxic to fish. It's also quite hard to control, and it could also feed algae a little bit faster. So in tanks, we mostly supply nitrogen as the nitrate, which is safer, more stable, easier to control, and is far, far less toxic to fish. So that's why fertilizers use nitrate-based nitrogen, like potassium nitrate, say. So you might hear people, or perhaps like more old school, sort of like fish keeping, where maybe they've just got like the odd plant in the tank. They might sort of say, well, the fish waste provides enough nitrogen or form of nitrogen in order to feed the plants. And in a very, very lightly planted tank, then that might be the case, and you might not need to add any nitrate into the tank. But if you're more of an aquascaper, if you've got a high-tech tank with CO2, with high lighting and very, very dense plant mass, then you will absolutely need to dose nitrogen at some point in your tank's life cycle. So if you don't and your nitrates basically hit 0, then the plants are going to start starving. The growth stalls, algae can basically move in because the plants aren't competing anymore because they're not healthy. There's not enough healthy plant biomass to basically run the system anymore. So a classic sign of nitrogen deficiency is all the leaves turn yellow, the growth rate sort of stalls, if the stems look thin and leggy, the overall plant just looks weak, and no matter what you're dosing, nothing's really happening. It might just be the case that nitrogen is a limiting factor. And nitrogen is mobile in plants, so they can steal it from old leaves to feed new ones. So you might notice older leaves look a little bit crap as well. But for most planted tanks, a healthy nitrate range is between 5 and 20 parts per million. So if you're trying to sort of keep it on the low end, 5 would be fine without starving the plants. And low light tanks or low tech tanks can live at the lower end, whereas high light CO2 tanks probably do a little bit better at the higher end. But again, it's not always about chasing numbers. It's just sort of creating a balance and just making sure that it never hits 0. So nitrate does not always directly cause algae, so it's not something that you should be scared about dosing. It's generally an imbalance that causes algae. And if plants are starving for nitrogen, they stop growing, the algae takes over, and it basically makes use of the available light and the other available nutrients that the plants are no longer taking up. But when you perform a water change, that doesn't just remove the nitrate, it completely resets the system. It prevents build-up, it refreshes the nutrients, and it gives you a little bit more control over the balance, which is why weekly water changes are always going to be important, especially on a high-tech planted tank. So if you have perhaps dosed a little bit too much, you're basically resetting those levels with a nice big water change. So yeah, all of that is to say that fish waste doesn't necessarily give enough nitrogen. Zero nitrate does not necessarily mean a healthy tank, but you may be chasing that in order to get your plants ready. But we've done a video on that, which is about nitrate limitation, so I will link that so you can have a little watch of that. Nitrates don't necessarily cause algae, it's just an imbalance. Nitrogen is the engine of growth, and without it, plants can't build new tissue. And with it, they grow strong, healthy, and can help to outcompete algae in your tank. So when I was editing this video, I realised that there was two things that I maybe didn't touch upon as much as I should have done. And the whole point of this video is to deep dive into the topic in order to help you understand it better. And to do it justice, I felt like I needed to just come on and add something extra whilst I was editing the video. And one of the things is about balance, because we throw this term around in the aquascaping hobby like everybody knows what it means. And, you know, the reason that you've got algae is because your tank's unbalanced, or this is a perfect tank because it's all balanced and in harmony. But what does that even mean? Because to a beginner, it means nothing. So I just kind of wanted to touch upon that. But the first thing that I just wanted to cover, which was something that we did touch upon in the beginning of this video, but I perhaps didn't go into as much depth as I should have done. And it's about ammonia and ammonium. Obviously, we talked about how nitrogen can exist in different forms in the aquarium, and it doesn't just exist as nitrate, and it moves through different chemical forms. And the two that matter the most to us as aquarists are ammonia and ammonium, and they get used interchangeably. And actually, it's quite important that they don't, because they are very different in terms of how they can affect fish. So they are kind of like the same molecule. They're both like a form of nitrogen, but which state that they take, whether it's ammonia or ammonium, depend mainly on pH and also slightly temperature. So if you have a low pH, about sort of like lower than 7.5, what you will mostly have is ammonium with the M on the end. And if you have a high pH, sort of above 8, that will shift more to ammonia. And this matters because ammonia is the toxic one. And it's an uncharged ion, which means that it can pass directly across fish gills and membranes and disrupt how they sort of function, how they regulate and stuff like that. Which is why ammonia spikes are extremely dangerous, and you will often hear terms such as ammonia burn, because it literally does burn the fish's gills. And it's deadly. It's deadly to fish, shrimp, and sort of any creatures that we would put in our aquarium. Whereas ammonium, this carries a charge and it doesn't cross membranes and cells and things like that as easily. And it's far less dangerous to fish and shrimp and things like that. It's far less toxic. It's for the most part safe. I imagine in high volumes it could potentially be dangerous, but it is safe. But there is something else here, and that is how algae and plants as well, but algae and plants can both use ammonia and ammonium directly. And in fact, they prefer it because it requires far less energy to assimilate it. With nitrogen or nitrate, they have to break it down in the cells, whereas this is like pre-packaged and ready to go. But algae generally reacts faster. It's not like it has a root system. It doesn't have leaves and things like that. So we can make use of it quicker. So if there's free ammonia or ammonium, even just briefly in the aquarium, algae can act on this a lot quicker than a plant can. So instability can create major triggers for algae. So these ammonia spikes that might not seem all that much, maybe you think, well, my filter can handle this. Algae can actually act on this. So ammonia spikes are sort of dangerous for a lot of reasons, but also algae can also benefit off this as well. So on the topic of algae, and also this is where I sort of wanted to explain what balance was. In biology, growth is controlled by the limiting factor. So the resource that's in shortest supply relative to demand is the one that pretty much controls the system. So if nitrate becomes the limiting factor in your tank, it can't build proteins efficiently, or enzymes and, things like that. So it weakens, the growth slows, and older leaves may begin to break down. And when a plant decays and when it starts dying or losing leaves, this can release ammonia back into the system. And as we've established, algae can take advantage of ammonia. So overfeeding, poor maintenance sessions, and unhealthy plants can cause algae issues. And if you have low nitrate, the plants obviously aren't going to be healthy. And when obviously you don't have healthy plants, that's when you can get like the ammonia spikes. So on the flip side of that, annoyingly, too higher nitrates can cause algae, but rarely do nutrients act alone in this instance when they're sort of overabundant. So in an aquarium, generally light and CO2 drive demand. They kind of dictate how many nutrients that the plant mass is capable of taking up. So if you have nitrate in really high supply, you've got really high nitrates, but your light isn't sort of powerful, it doesn't have enough energy, or your CO2's low, that nitrogen is then in a surplus. It's just extra because the plants don't need it. There's no demand for it because the light energy, the light power isn't high enough. And that's kind of what we mean by balance. And I hope that kind of makes a little bit more sense. It's when the supply and demand is out of sync. So too little nitrate can weaken plants and create ammonia and instability. And too much nitrate without light and without CO2 can contribute to a surplus. So it's different situations, but the same outcome, if that makes sense. Algae basically exploits imbalance. So I hope all of this helps you sort of realise that if you have been a little bit dubious about dosing nitrogen, it's nothing to be worried about. I dose it like crazy in this tank. It's just as important as any other nutrient. It's one of your macronutrients, which is sort of like a telltale sign that this is obviously important because it's one of the big three. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope this video helped you understand a little bit more about nitrogen. And I will see you next time for the next video, which will be part 4 of this series. Again, if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you want to. It's free. And it will just help me to create more content and bring you more information. Alongside this, I have also got some build videos coming up, so please stick around for them. This is probably going to get a reskip pretty soon as well. I just need to sort of say goodbye to it. I always find it quite hard taking down a tank that I love. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.